we need to record this, and we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel. The town has a YouTube channel and our website for you all to view at a later time. Without further ado, Brian.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. And welcome, everyone. I'm going to, is there anyone on the Zoom call tonight that has not had an opportunity to review the study that was posted?
I haven't.
All right. That's fair. So as Aaron mentioned, it's on the town website, and it's also posted to the West Kennebec Lakes Community Broadband Association website, which is wklcba.org. So if you want more information, you can go to that site and see what everyone else is doing. To give a little bit of background, I'm going to share my screen. And actually, Aaron, can you let me share my screen since I made you the host?
Sure. How do I do that? I can make you co-host.
Do that.
All
right.
Awesome.
And,
I just did that.
all right. So can everyone see my screen? It's a map of the 6 communities. Starting at the top, Vienna, Mount Vernon, Fayette, Reedfield, Wayne, and Leeds. So does everyone see that on the screen? Just shake your head yes or no. And all right. So
Yeah.
what you're looking at here is the 6 communities got together to work together to understand where you have high-speed broadband availability and where you do not. And for those areas where you don't, what would the potential solutions be to fill in those gaps? So this is the cover page for the study that shows the 6 communities, and the light blue lines represent the cable TV infrastructure. So those areas of each community that have access to Charter Spectrum and their high-speed internet service. All of the other areas that you don't see where there's little blue lines don't have that kind of capability. So within Wayne, it's primarily around the lake or the southwest section of Wayne. So what we did is we went out and drove all of the roadways, all of the long driveways to identify where this infrastructure was in place and where it wasn't. We also identified where the phone company had fiber optic cable. But we didn't really focus on where the DSL speeds were available because we really don't have the information that lets us map out specific speeds by the DSL availability. So that's a picture. The report, if you look at the table of contents, the first section talks about the different internet access technologies that are available. And in Wayne, that's primarily DSL, which stands for Digital Subscriber Line. And that's where Consolidated Communications uses the existing twisted pair copper cables that go into everyone's home to provide internet service. But that service is low speed and distance sensitive. So depending on how far you are from the Consolidated Communications central office or their remote terminals will dictate how fast the internet service that you receive will be. So it'll vary anywhere from 25 megabits downstream to many folks get probably less than 5 megabits. So very, very low service, low speed service. The cable modem service is advertised as a minimum 100 megabit over 10, which should be more than sufficient for any household to conduct its business. And then there's also other wireless technologies that may be available. Fixed wireless is what a company like Redzone utilizes, where you require line of sight between the tower and your home or business. 4G LTE Advanced is your cell phone. So if you're using your cell phone to stream data, that's called 4G LTE. And then there's 5G wireless that everyone has heard about, that is primarily going to be available in densely populated metropolitan areas. It's not going to be available in a town like Wayne, where you are fairly rural. And then, of course, many folks may be utilizing satellite service, which has data caps and is fairly low speed, and there's a lot of delay in the satellite service. And then the other technology that's available is fiber to the home, where there is a fiber cable connected directly to everyone's home from the central office with unlimited speeds. Today, none of that is available in the town of Wayne, but could be, depending upon how you decide that as a town you wish to proceed. So I would encourage everyone to read through that section of the study. That'll provide a lot of background and understanding of the different technologies that are available. So I'm going to stop right there and ask, is there any questions related to the different types of technology? And hearing none, I'll move on. So the first part of the plan, keep in mind this study was for 6 towns. So there's a lot of pages, but if you drill down to just Wayne, it's really not that much. So if we go to the page 22 in this study, it'll show you all of the roadways that have cable TV infrastructure. And then if you go down further, and I apologize, you're seeing a lot of pages flash by on the screen. So in Wayne, the light green roadways are the areas that do not have cable TV infrastructure. So primarily in the southwest half of the town, although there are a couple of areas in the northern half that don't have cable TV infrastructure. So those are the areas that are unserved and that need to be addressed in one form or another. So what we look at is what is the mileage of all of these road segments? How many potential subscribers are there along those road segments? And we collate that information. And on page 59 of the report, we show all of the road segments that have existing cable TV and those that don't. So in Wayne, there's just a little bit more than 14 miles of road segments that don't have cable TV infrastructure, representing about 216 residents that don't have access to high-speed broadband. So with that information, then we're able to determine, and this is a table on page 62 of the report that shows that 35 miles of roadway in Wayne is covered by cable TV infrastructure. 14 miles is not. 216 subscribers. So if you wanted to work with the local cable company to expand that coverage, the total cost would be about $647,000 to expand that network. Now, of course, the cable company would pay a portion of that, but they would be looking for the local town to cover another portion. And that, we don't know what that split is until you go through a negotiation. So it would be something less than 650,000. If you wanted to build a fiber to the home system throughout the entire town of Wayne, then the cost would be just shy of $3 million, between 3 million and 3.5 million, depending upon the contingencies, to cover all of Wayne with very, very high speed internet. So this study was designed to identify what was served, what's not served, what the costs would be to fill in those gaps. And then as a group, the West Kennebec Lakes group solicited feedback from all of the service providers as to how they would go about filling in those gaps or providing even better service on a town-wide basis. So at this stage, we're still waiting on responses from the service providers. For the town of Vienna and Fayette, we've received a response from a company called Matrix. And those two towns are pretty much 100% unserved by cable. But Matrix has indicated that they would be willing to build out to the unserved roadways of the other 4 towns. So they're in the process of looking at that. So we're sort of in the midst of understanding who might be willing to come in and serve and what those costs would be from a sharing standpoint with those service providers. So I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions.
I have a question. That's Ken Spalding. With the cable, if we expand cable service, people would still have to buy into the cable service, correct, in order to get it?
That's correct.
Is there anything here, any of these options that don't require us then to buy into a private service in order to get high-speed cable or high-speed network?
So let me see if I can rephrase your question. Are you asking, is there an option here where the town would activate its own service?
Something like that, I guess. In other words, as opposed to the town investing the money to expand a private corporation's service to us, which we then still have to pay for, there'd be an option that the town would be expending its money, and then I don't know, would be there's probably never a no cost because there's always be some sort of maintenance and operational cost, but
Yeah, and that would be the fiber to the home high level estimate between 2.8 and $3.4 million. So that would be the capital cost to build, for the town to build its own network to cover all subscribers within the town limits. Now that's the capital cost to build. We were not asked to put together the operating pro forma yet, although that's something that the group is looking at, to see what would the service pricing need to be in order to recoup, that debt service and the operating costs and so forth. So that's an ongoing question. But the cost to build the network would be less than 3.5 million. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yes.
Brian, can you talk about the consolidated option and how they haven't offered it here, but they've offered it in New Hampshire towns? It's sort of a mix of local and public-private partnership type thing where the town would actually borrow the money, but they would provide a guarantee, but then Consolidated would provide the service.
Yeah, now what they've been doing that in communities that don't have cable TV service
Oh, okay.
or that don't have a lot of cable TV service. So the cable TV as a competitor is pretty formidable. So Consolidated has been looking at communities that don't have cable TV coverage to build fiber to the home networks. And in that model, they have the town finance a portion of that build out with a bond where Consolidated charges the subscribers an infrastructure fee of up to $10 per month to retire that bond principal and interest. And if there are not enough subscribers to retire that principal and interest, Consolidated guarantees that they'll cover it. So there's no risk to the town per se. But again, that's in communities where there's very little or no cable TV coverage. So you're in a different situation.
Hi, this is Hildy. I have a question. And sorry I came late to the meeting. But is it true still that there's only two choices in Wayne? There's Consolidated Communications and Spectrum, right? That's all that's available?
That's all that's available from a landline perspective. You could use your cell phone data plan,
Or
and
satellite.
there may be areas of the community that can acquire Red Zone Wireless or other wireless providers. But largely, yes, you're correct. It's Consolidated and Charter Spectrum.
How does Red Zone work?
They have in I don't know how close their towers are to Wayne, but they do have a wireless service. So if you go to redzone.com and put in your address, you can see whether or not they can serve your location.
They're starting to remember when we were talking about Red Zone and we met with Red Zone. There's parts of Leeds and Winthrop and Reedfield that they're starting to provide coverage, but they haven't
Right.
made it into Wayne, I guess, because I know that some residents have asked about that and they've looked into it. And
Yeah, the only thing I can tell you is go to their website, sign up, and they'll get back to you as to whether or not they can serve you. It's not a service, though, that'll reach all of the subscribers in Wayne. It's wherever they have basically line of sight between the tower and the subscriber location.
Hi, could you explain what you meant when you said cable TV is a formidable challenge? What did you mean?
Well, for other providers to come in and compete with the cable company, the cable company provides a service that in most cases is sufficient for the subscriber's needs. So, and they bundle internet, phone, video, all in one package. That's a formidable competitor to someone else who may come in and only offer internet or internet and phone. And they are a formidable competitor in that they're a nationwide provider. They're the 10,000-pound gorilla. So if you build your own network and you're going to compete against them, they have the ability to lower their prices
Mhm.
and make it hard for you to compete. Now, we haven't seen that occur in any jurisdictions yet, but they clearly have that capability. Now, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the cable company. So a lot of constituents would say, you know what, I don't care what their price is, I'm going to buy it off of somebody else. But what we find is that consumers vote with their wallet. So even if they don't like their provider, if they can pay less and get sufficient service, they'll do that. So it's something you always want to keep in the back of your mind.
Thank you.
Other questions? I think we have a question on chat or a comment, but
No, yeah, it's just a comment. There's so little choice. If I don't like Consolidated, I go to Spectrum, and I'm not going to like Spectrum either. And I've just been round the block with Consolidated recently, and they keep saying, you know, I have three megabytes here, right downtown in Wayne, you know, and they'd say, well, no, we're not going to. That's as fast as it's going to be. So if I
Right.
go to Spectrum, then I deal with the big monster cable company. So I just wonder if the town, if we, you know, if it's going to cost $3 million to create our own network, that seems like that's not going to happen. So I don't know if there's any other choices.
You are in an unfortunate situation in that if you I can say this, I can look back 40 years. I got into the business in 1984, the year that they broke up the Bell system. And everyone wanted competition. And they wanted multiple providers to be able to select from. And that's what drove the whole deregulation. But what happened at the same time was prior to 1984, rural areas were subsidized by densely populated metropolitan areas. And when you paid your local phone bill, the price was the same regardless of where you lived, but the metropolitan areas were more profitable, so they used that profit to offset the unprofitability of the lower populated rural areas. Long distance telephone service subsidized local service. business services subsidized residential. But when they deregulated and they opened up everything to competition, all of those subsidies went away. So today, you're living in a community that is rural, and it's not as densely populated as is required by the for-profit companies to generate the return that their stakeholders expect. And there's nothing to fill in that gap. So unfortunately, you're in a situation where you're only going to have one or two providers unless the community itself steps up to build its own network. It's one of those unintended consequences of deregulation and competition. It was great for metropolitan areas. It wasn't so good for rural areas. And that's where you sit today. Sorry, but that's the reality.
I have a question. It seems like I see in the paper once in a while that there's some efforts around the state to improve network, connect for people. And is there any state or federal subsidies for a town to be able to build their own network?
There are, at the federal level, those subsidies are typically for areas that have speeds of 10 megabit down and 1 megabit up, which is very low speed. At the Connect Maine state level, there's subsidies available for areas that have 25/3 or less, which would be a large portion of your uncabled area within Wayne. So there are subsidy dollars available, but keep in mind you're competing with other communities for those dollars. So the voters recently approved a $15 million bond issue for Connect Maine to help fill in these broadband gaps. So that 15 million is going to become available probably in the November, December timeframe of this year for communities to apply for. Keeping in mind that the statewide need is about 600 million to fill in all of those gaps. And there's only 15 million available. So there's going to be a lot of competition for those dollars. So if Wayne would like to pursue those dollars, they're going to need to put together an application that is compelling. So when I say compelling, that means that the lower amount per potential subscriber is going to get the subsidy dollars from Connect Maine. So the more subscribers they can cover with the fewest amount of dollars, the better it is for Connect Maine. So for Wayne, you would need to come up with some dollars on your own as a match to the Connect Maine subsidy dollars in order to compete for those dollars.
So can the 6 towns apply for that money jointly to make it look better?
They could apply for it jointly. They could apply for it individually.
Which would be better?
Well, every town is different. So if I look at Reedfield, they're 97% or 96% covered by the cable company. So they're not going to be eligible for a lot of subsidy dollars. Fayette and Vienna are well positioned because in the view of Connect Maine, those communities are unserved completely. For Wayne,
Leeds too?
I'm sorry,
Leeds as well?
they're partially covered. They're very similar to Wayne. in about 50-50. So it's a matter of deciding what is your vision and your goals. Do you want to have your own network? Do you want to partner with someone else? If you want to partner with someone else, then you need to be positioned when those dollars become available to pursue those grant dollars with that partner. So in the case of the West Kennebec Lakes Group, we've received one proposal so far from service providers, and we're expecting a couple more, but we don't know how that's going to pan out yet. So we're still in the midst of that.
So I just did a rough calculation, but it's probably not even worth even me talking about it. But if we were to borrow the 3 million at 3% over 30 years, the annual debt service would be around 168,000 a year. That's short of a mil. It's about 3/4 of a mil. But that would be paid back by subscriber costs. So, but then that doesn't include operational either. But but it's just something to think about. I mean, if it's that important to you.
What we find is that for communities that decide they want to build their own network, that between the service cost and any tax increase that would be required to service the debt, that the subscribers are still paying less than what they would otherwise pay to their existing provider. So it's not a big lift to do this. I mean, financially, you can make it work for the subscribers, that it's going to be equal to or less. But from a community standpoint, you do have an infrastructure that you have to maintain and that you have to operate. And typically communities will contract out the maintenance and operation of that network, but nonetheless, that's a lift. I mean, that's something that the community has to really think hard about before they pursue that.
Brian, we have a question here, and I think I have an answer to it. But before we met as a Western Lakes region group, I applied for a Connect Maine grant, and we worked with Spectrum at the time for trying to get residents on the Shooken Ferry and Tucker Road internet and cable, and they what do you call it? Spectrum was very helpful in doing their analysis, and they were going to contribute towards the funding of this. And according to Connect Maine, they said that our grant application was strong, but we did not provide a match. At the time, the town wasn't ready to even put money aside for this type of work. And it seems to me the way to go about this is in two parts. Is we have a outstanding, I think we talked about this in Pat Fact, in charter, you know, the, what do you call it? The contract basically for cable.
Franchise agreement?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. And it's expired over 10, 15 years now, but so we can renegotiate that. Am I right? And require them to basically start providing that service. But also at the same time, the town could probably kick in money, potentially do our own borrowing, like we do borrow for roads, but also apply for Connect Maine grant to get some money for that too as a match. And I know that Spectrum was willing to kick in some money, and that would probably cover that $600,000 to $700,000 that you gave in that report as an estimate to basically fund the whole town. It's not served by cable. Is that correct? Is that a way that we could go about this, like either piecemeal or even do it?
Yeah, what I would recommend is if you want to pursue a Charter Spectrum solution, then have them price out exactly what the cost would be, what portion of that cost they would cover, and what portion they would expect the town to cover. And then the town could pursue a Connect Main grant for a portion or all of the town obligation. Keeping in mind that the Connect Main grants are competitive and are largely scored based on the dollars that would be contributed by Connect Main per subscriber. So the lower you can get that dollar per subscriber request to Connect Main, the greater your chances are of success in getting a grant, which
So-
means that the local community would have to come up with some portion of that.
So Aaron, does your proposal just go so far as to get cable to everyone in town, but not improve cable to all the town? Or
Was-
internet?
Well, I mean, it's in his study. He provided that, I think, on one of the pages. What page was that?
Yeah, well,
No, I know. I just wanted to hear what your proposal linked to. That's all.
Well, it's not really my proposal, but anyways.
I know what you said.
Okay,
Sure.
okay. All right. Was just one of the things that I was thinking is that we could probably just, there's, the way I see it, there's kind of like two options. Is this big high-speed internet system, right? You know, but that Brian's talking about. And then there's, you know, where the town becomes a bedfellow with the cable company that nobody likes. But at least we get minimum coverage throughout the town. And that's that $650,000 price. And so the thought was that, like Brian said, we would just have them get them an estimate, have them give us an estimate to provide coverage throughout the whole town, and then apply for a Connect Main grant. Anyways, the last time we did it, we scored well. We were very competitive. The problem was that, like he said, it's very competitive, and we were just like 1 or 2 points away, and it was because the town didn't contribute anything. It was unfortunate, but we just didn't have the money, and we didn't appropriate any. But we scored a lot of points on a public, what do you call it, participation, or we had a lot of letters of support and petitions that people signed and supporting it. So that's
I'll cut to the chase. If the cost is $650,000, Charter Spectrum is likely to cover 50% of that, which means the town would have to cover the other 50%, or $325,000. And if you went to Connect Main for half of that, or you know, a little over 150,000 of that amount, you would probably be successful. But that means that the town has to come up with that other 25%. So it's everyone, all of the granting authorities are looking to leverage their dollars. So if they can contribute $1 and there's $3 in match, that's really good.
Brian, can I just speak to that a little bit? Just to put in perspective, the town has borrowed in the past, like we did 6 road bonds, and they earned around $300,000 a year for those road bonds, and they were 5-year bonds. And you know, the town debt service annual payments is around $60,000 a year for those, and we're paying them down. You know, we have a couple more years left, but I mean, it's not untenable. You know, if the town's really supportive of this, it's not going to approve some of your service, but the people that don't have it now would probably appreciate that, certainly. And at least everybody would be on par with with cable and high-speed internet. And so the borrowing of that wouldn't be unreasonable. That's all I wanted to say about that. It's just-
Other questions? David, you're muted. David, were you trying to say something? No, I think you have to hit your unmute button. Unless Aaron, you're able to unmute him.
Oh. I can just ask to unmute. I can't unmute him.
David, why don't you put something in chat since we can't hear you?
The lower left corner on my screen.
David, if you bring your cursor down clear to the bottom of your screen, you should see a mute and stop video button. If you hit the mute button, you can unmute yourself. Or not.
He has a speaker plugged in too, though, headphones.
Uh-oh. We got tech support coming in.
She fixed it last time.
Well, while we're waiting on David, does anybody else have any questions?
What's the next step?
So the next step is we're in the midst of it, working with the providers to understand what their willingness is, how much they're willing to contribute, if any, to fill in these gaps. Again, we have one proposal on the table. They're working to modify that to include the unserved areas of Wayne to see what that would look like. We're still expecting Charter Spectrum to come to the table with a proposal, and we're hopeful that Consolidated will come to the table with a proposal. This is a time-consuming process, and all of the providers are overwhelmed right now with communities that want to expand the availability of broadband. So it's I wish there was something I could tell you to do to get their attention quicker. And at the end of the day, what really gets their attention is dollars. So they're investing wherever they can get the greatest amount of subsidy. That's the unvarnished reality, is that wherever they can get the greatest subsidy. So as a community, if you were to come forward and say, look, we're willing to cover X percent of whatever the investment is that's required, then that will get their attention. Other than that, you're in line like everybody else.
So I think Dave has a question. He said see above. I'm not really sure, but it said, what about the green box on Walton Road? I think what he's talking about is it, excuse my language, it's not my dad used to work for the phone company and he used to call them slick sites. They're those Brian, you probably understand what I'm saying, that
Yeah,
it's equipment
they're,
that boost the,
so those, the generic term is remote terminal. So there's a terminal cabinet out in the field that will service, um, the phrase SLIC, SLC, it was subscriber line concentrator. That's an old technology that have been upgraded to provide DSL service or internet service over copper cable. You can be very close to a remote terminal, but if the direction of the cable is not in your direction, you may not be able to get service from that. So it's all depending upon how their cable infrastructure is designed and deployed. And again, it's distance sensitive. So the further you are from that remote terminal, the slower the speed will be, but you could be right beside it and still not get good service because it's providing service beyond you, not back to you. So only Consolidated can answer that question. The comment from Ken is we have DSL like Hildy, 3 down, less than 1 up. Our road is serviced by cable. We choose not to do business with Spectrum, one of the worst rated companies for service in the country. Can't imagine subsidizing them. That's the sentiment of a lot of folks, but nonetheless, the cable company service is going to be a lot better than the 3 down, 1 up that you're getting from Consolidated. That's the reality.
so Brian,
Yeah.
question.
Not great, but we find it serviceable, I guess. It meets,
We're able to
we're able to
download
do
movies.
most of the things that we want to do.
Right. So I'm at camp right now and I have 12/1 service and I'm talking to you via Zoom. It's sufficient for my needs as long as my wife doesn't get on the internet at the same time. So, but if you're, if you're a younger family and you've got 2 or 3 or 4 kids at home that are trying to participate in school over Zoom, 3/1 probably isn't going to do it. So everyone's in a different situation.
Brian, I have a question. With regard to the franchise agreement, could we theoretically, since we're like the public utility authority in town, put out to bid ourselves? I mean, and find a different provider for cable?
You could, but keep in mind that all of the cable company holds all the cards, both legally and politically. So in order to kick them out, it's probably going to take you, I'm going to guess, 5 years and probably 7 figures in legal fees, even though you have an expired franchise agreement. You don't have a lot of leverage with the cable company.
Okay.
So while technically you could do that, I think realistically, boy, that's a big one to swallow. You'd be better off building your own network and competing with them than trying to kick them out. It would probably cost you less.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Can I ask a question for everybody? What do you think? Just hearing some of the options, spend 7 figures to kick them out is one option. do nothing is one option. Work with Spectrum or build out a full network, like a high-speed network. Those are the four options, I guess. Thoughts, comments?
I think we would need more information about building out our own network, the operational costs, the maintenance costs, to get a full, to fully understand, and not only the cost, but how it would actually work, to get a full understanding of that option.
Hildy?
Yeah, I was just writing, I think it's really important that everyone has access to high-speed internet. So if we'd have to go with the Spectrum route to make sure that everybody has access, then I would favor doing that, so that we can build out. So, I mean, it's just really equal access is really important.
Brian, what's your thought about, let's just say, we could probably get this thing up and running, working with Spectrum sooner than building out a whole network. What if we were to go ahead and let's just say negotiate with Spectrum, we'll just say, and we get them to build out the network like we talked about with the 650K, and then later down the road, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, we decided, oh, we really just want to build our own fiber network. Is that something that is could we do it that way? Or
It's certainly an option. It's, Spectrum has been very, very slow working with communities. So if you want to pursue that avenue, my recommendation is you pursue that avenue regardless of whatever else you think you might want to do. You ought to do that in parallel to see what they would come to the table with, so that you're ensuring that you're performing all of the due diligence that's required here. But in our experience, they're very slow to come to the table. And in fact, you might be able to build your own network quicker than you could get Spectrum to expand their network. But you ought to pursue, regardless of what you do, you should stay in discussion with Spectrum to see what they might want to do for you. That's your lowest cost solution. It
would
would bring you the best service.
that wouldn't hurt our chances of like say we did for some reason we were able to get them to act quickly, we'll just say, and then we signed a contract or something and we made it all happen, at least on paper. But then we go ahead, we're working with you folks at Kennebec, Western Kennebec, broadband folks, and that would that hurt our chances for getting more money later to build out the whole network?
Certainly. Yeah. If you have Spectrum fill in all your gaps, then those gaps are not going to be eligible for subsidy funding from the state or the feds.
Right.
How much of the town that isn't served by cable is also not able to access DSL?
The areas that are not covered by cable are all able to access DSL at varying speeds. And we don't have the specifics as to what the speeds are for the DSL service, because that's not data that Consolidated is shared with us or that we can determine by looking at the infrastructure. Clearly, it's all low-speed DSL, but most of those people have an option, even if it's only 3/1 or less. But, you know, but we don't have a clear picture.
Is there any way to know how many people have access to cable but choose not to buy it? Or access to DSL and choose not to purchase that?
The cable company and the phone company won't provide that kind of detail. So you would have to survey your constituents to discover that.
I guess part of that question is, if we spend 600,000 or 150,000 or whatever it is of town money to do this, you know, how many people will it actually serve once you look at people making their choice of whether or not to acquire it?
Well, we know that I'm going to share my screen again. We know that in Wayne, there are 216 potential subscriber locations that do not have access to cable. So those 216 have access to DSL at varying speeds. 665 have access to the cable system. Does that answer your question?
Partially. I mean, if 665 have access to cable, and if this is correct, does that mean also, and the 216 don't have access to cable? So we have 665 that do have access and 216 who don't?
That's correct.
Can you share that a map again? Actually, never mind. Don't worry about it. Oh, sorry. Well, actually, I do have a question for you, Brian. On page 59, I think it is, you did that table where 57, I guess, page 57. So it's, I guess it's different in my book.
There's been an update probably
Okay.
since.
All right. So right there, yeah. According to the franchise agreement, they're required to provide coverage for I forget what you call it, but what is it, 15 houses per mile? Does that sound right?
Every franchise agreement is different. I don't recall what Wayne's is, but
Well,
let's say, for
it is
instance,
15. It is 15. I know that.
all right. So if it's 15, it's 15 homes per mile from the existing infrastructure. That doesn't mean that all of these road segments are from existing infrastructure. All right.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah. All right.
So you have to look at where does their cable end, and then the next mile, if there's 15 homes in that next mile, then they have to serve that. So what we looked at here was that there's over 14 miles of infrastructure, 200 of unserved roadways, 216 potential subscribers, averages 1,500 homes per mile. What that tells me is that Spectrum would cover a significant portion of the infrastructure, the cost to build out that infrastructure. They probably wouldn't cover 100% of it. So there's a portion that they would expect you to cover.
Well, I'm just looking at, because we have a lot of people out in the Strickland Ferry Tucker Road area, and that's the area that we did that grant for, and anyways, there's a lot of development out there, and I don't know how current these numbers are, but you know, there's people like literally building houses out there right now, and so that would definitely boost our whatever.
Well, that's why I say it's always good to maintain communication with the cable company, see what they're willing to do. There's a lot of activity taking place. So let's, you know, and I've attempted on the part of West Kennebec Lakes Community Broadband Association to engage Spectrum. They keep promising they're going to come back with something, but they haven't done it yet. So I don't have a big stick that I can make them come back with something. So we're in a waiting game right now.
Do you know anybody with a big stick?
Governor Mills.
Oh, all right.
I'll let you know November 3rd.
Well, without passing any judgment here as to party affiliation or whatever, but if the governor's office would reach out to the CEO of Charter and say, we need help, and begin having those discussions at a high level, that would help the situation. It certainly wouldn't hurt. Whether it's a Democratic or a Republican governor, having those discussions at a high level would be useful.
Would it be useful for like us? I mean, we're Little Wayne, but maybe writing letters to start writing letters, like maybe the select board would write a letter to the governor and our legislative delegation, encouraging them to have the governor negotiate with Charter Spectrum.
Wouldn't hurt.
This is a minor question, I guess, but on that last chart, I noticed unserved was Winona Way, and it showed a number 12. Is that supposed to be the number of people who live on that road? Because
So on Winona Way, we identified what appears to be 12 potential subscriber locations within 0.3 miles.
Oh,
So if I look at the map
okay,
of Winona Way,
so that's
Is that the Richardson?
on Winona Way. That's the people within 0.3 of a mile of Winona Way.
I'm going to show you exactly how we do this.
Okay.
so might even include murder.
And does that include, is that only year round, or is that also seasonal?
We don't differentiate. So if I look at this green segment of Winona Way, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 potential subscribers that would be served by that infrastructure. Now,
Except that
granted,
this is
many of those may be seasonal.
except that that's not Winona Way.
That whole thing is not.
Winona.
I see here it says Hudson Drive. um, we won't claim that it's entirely accurate as to the road names. But that's the area represented by that.
Well, you see where it's labeled Winona Way?
Yes,
That's Winona Way down there. And they're 2 year-round and 1 seasonal house served by Winona Way. And even where it shows if that's Hudson, it's not labeled, but if that was Hudson, that's actually not where the road goes either. But Winona Way has 2. I guess what I'm looking at is as both the whether this is weighted by seasonal homes and also sort of the accuracy of it.
yeah, so we're using parcel boundary data from the state of Maine that's submitted by each town. And we're using E911 addressing that's submitted by each town to identify where the roadway is and how many subscribers. So this is all dependent upon the accuracy of the information that Wayne submits to the state of Maine.
Okay. Because that road doesn't exist anymore,
Which
or at least as it's shown. And everything north of Margaret's Island Road is all, including what's on Margaret's Island Road, is all seasonal. People are there for a week, usually, or 2 weeks
But a lot of
for
them
the summer.
want
They like to
internet.
have internet. They like to have cable, especially during COVID times when there are people who are up here working. But this,
Yeah,
this is unusual.
yeah, we have no ability to determine whether it's seasonal or year round. So probably the same situation up here.
Correct.
Even our town's tax records really don't have any identification to differentiate between year-round or seasonal.
I guess I just think it makes a difference in terms of how much you want to invest if you're to serve every residence, every building in town.
But if all those dots are people that presently have cable,
No, those are
I know.
the little
Those
yellow
are-
dot,
Those are what is reported as 911 addresses.
okay.
So, and what we find is that even that data is not entirely up to date or accurate.
knowing our 911 officer, those records are very, very accurate.
Well,
Is that you, Aaron?
No,
Oh, I'm just saying generically, we find error. I mean, we don't rely on those. What we do is we actually look at the Google Earth imagery, which is dated. But so we use a combination of the Google Earth imagery and anything that we can see that may not have a 911 address. And we'll even go back, let's see, and look at historical imagery to see if we can identify structures that may be a potential subscriber location.
yikes.
Just because the data, we're using the best publicly available data that we have access to.
yeah, that wasn't a complaint about the study. It's just looking at what is available and
No, and I
Make
thought it was
decisions.
important for you to understand how we go about it. No offense taken. And your point is well taken. In terms of if you're to build your own infrastructure, take rate or market share is going to be critically important. And if those seasonal residents aren't going to subscribe on a year-round basis, that's going to impact your financial results. So it's a great observation. Other questions? None of this is easy, is it?
So what's the next step?
Fill out a
Again,
survey. Oh, sorry.
we're in the midst of it, finding out what the providers are willing to do. And again, that takes a while. From the community's next step, education. Really educating your constituents as to what the reality is on the ground, and to see what are they willing to do to help solve that gap.
Need a survey of sorts that can go out to folks?
Surveys have value. It's a question as to how much value. It's really engaging your constituents, having those discussions and collecting that information. But sending out a survey in paper or via email isn't going to really get you what you're after. You got to really find out where's the head? How are they thinking about this? How important is it to them that they have access to high-speed internet? And are they willing to support a subsidy on the part of the town to get that? That's where it really comes down. So I'm not familiar with Wayne. But what we often tell folks is go to the town dump on Saturday morning and engage everybody that comes through. Now, maybe there's trash service in Wayne, I don't know. But find where are the people coming into the community? Is it a local store? What have you? Set up, have your broadband committee set up a table and engage those constituents and really find out what are they willing to support. And it takes a dialogue. Again, a random survey isn't really going to tell you what you need to know. You got to have those conversations.
Brian, I'll try to ask a question, even though I have really slow speed. Just realistic ballpark. If we are going to sort of renegotiate with Spectrum or try to get something from them, is that realistically, that's 2 or 3 years. What is, do you know what that is? Or also, if we wanted to build out our own fiber network, is that a 5-year project? Or, what's the time frame ballpark on either of these, do you think?
So with Spectrum, from the time you start the discussion until everybody is activated is probably 18 months. And that's assuming that you come to an agreement with them within 6 months. But it's going to take a year to build out that network. If you do it yourself, it's going to take, from the time you're fully funded and you've selected your construction contractor and your network operator, it's going to take you 12 to 18 months. So to design your network, to go out to RFP, you're looking at 2 to 3 years before you reach satisfaction. And that's aggressive. If I look at the island of Islesboro, from the time they started until they were done, it was 7 years. Did I answer your question? All right.
So it's too late for you, Chris. Your kids will be in college by then.
My kids are already starting college, so yes, it
all
will
right.
definitely be late. I'm thinking actually, for Kim and myself
Oh.
now. So,
Actually,
though I will say, working from home and kids remote learning, not a good setup with DSL.
it's, education is key, but community survivability is probably the bigger question. And from an economic development standpoint, in the state of Maine, the greatest opportunity for communities to thrive is to have high-speed internet. So if you want to sell your home quickly, you're not going to do it unless you have high-speed internet. If you want to sell it at a price that is at the top end, you're not going to do it without high-speed internet. And if you want a community that is growing, keeping the schools full, lowering the tax base, you need in-migration, not out-migration. And that takes high-speed internet. So it really comes down to what's the vision and what are the goals of the community, and how does internet fit into all that. But in any analysis, it's a key component in this day and age.
In the meantime, for those of us who are DSL users, I'd like to just say Kim, I don't think she'd mind my using her name. Kim King told me about a month ago that because she was working from home, she had her kids working or her daughter doing schoolwork, and I think actually a third person. And anyway, make a long story short, she called Consolidated Communication, and they were somehow able to offer her a faster DSL.
At less price.
At less price, she said. She said her bill is less and she's getting faster. So like Chris, if you haven't tried calling Consolidated Communications, you might want to try that. And actually I did that once years ago. I called Consolidated Communications and they said they could, that I wasn't on their fastest plan. So they don't apparently just offer people their fastest plan if you had signed up for it. Anyway, it's an idea.
My fastest plan
point.
for me is $38,000 if I want to be on a faster plan. $38,000.
Consolidated Communications said that? Ooh,
If I want a faster line to be almost like cable speed, it's 38,000 because
Well,
because the distance to the closest switching center is on 133 somewhere, and they have to bring line all the way to my house. It's ridiculous.
that
But
is ridiculous.
Your point is well taken. Is as painful as it might be, every 90 days you ought to call the phone company and the cable company to see if you can get better service. And they're sometimes their own worst enemy in that they have not been successful in marketing their own services for whatever reason. So it's really incumbent upon you to reach out to them. What else? So everyone's excited after this call. Nobody's down. You have a vision and you know what you want to do. So am I right or not? No. David, we haven't heard from you.
Your sarcasm is well placed.
Well, I don't mean to make light of it. I work with communities all over the state, and what you're going through is not unique. If I have any advice, it's keep at it. build that support within the community to achieve whatever your vision and goal is. Don't give up. And many communities are getting satisfaction, but it's a lot of hard work. It really is. So
Do you have a committee? Do you have a committee, Aaron?
Well, we're part of this regional coalition.
But I mean, for the town to work on this.
We before we joined this regional coalition, we had a small committee. I think Dave was on it, and Stan and Connie Ireland. We certainly, I think, now that we have this information, we certainly could reconstitute it and add other people to it if that's something that we want to do, to see if to sort through some of this information.
I'll share that those communities that are successful in achieving their goals all have a broadband committee. The committee has a select board member on it that is supportive of the effort. And they have a varied membership. So somebody with a finance background, somebody with a technical background, ideally some young people, a high school student, somebody that may be in college or just out of college. The younger generation are the ones that are going to benefit from this long term, but they also have a unique perspective that is key to building community support in achieving your goals. So get a wide spectrum of people on your committee. Don't make it too big, but you got to have a committee. Folks that are out there driving for success.
Anybody want to be on a committee?
I will. I think it's important.
Ken or Sue?
Mhm.
No, thanks.
No, thanks. I was
Yes.
saying yay, to Debbie volunteering.
Chris or Kim?
Chris had to step out. Maybe he will.
All right.
But thanks for asking.
Well, if there's nothing else, Aaron, I'm going to drop off and I'll let you all continue.
Actually, one more person I wanted to ask. Amy Tucker, is that something you want to be on potentially?
Maybe.
You don't have to answer right now. All right. I just shouldn't have put you on the spot. All right.
Check with
Right.
Hildy too, Aaron.
Yeah.
Check
Oh.
with Hildy.
I do think it's important, and I think we need options. I'm a little overspread right now, but
Thank you for attending. Thank you. And thank you, Brian.
All right. I'm going to sign off and I'll let you all continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron,
Thanks.
for having the
Yep.
meeting and
Yep.
Thanks.
everybody.
You're all
Bye.
set, Aaron?
Yep, we're all set.
All right. Good night.
Bye.